So eventually, this Bretton Woods system collapsed in the it started in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. The dollar's position was not stabilized by the above measures, and in the U.S. ran a trade deficit in 1971, leaving the 10.2 billion in gold reserves after two shocks in May and July, and 52 billion in short-term external debt. In face of the intense pressure and the massive fly out of the dollar, and the banks in some countries even charge interest on foreign deposits. And on August 15, 1971, the US President Richard Nixon was forced to implement the new economic policy and stop buying gold at $35 at 1 ounce. A 10% surcharge on import of foreign goods, freeze the wages and price on meat for 90 days. The dollar's peg to gold has in effect shaken the foundation of this Bretton Woods system, and the peg had become unsustainable. In December 1971, the G10 building held a meeting at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., discussed the reach of and reached by the Smithsonian Agreement that is 7.8% for gold dollar depreciation charge changed from the 35 an ounce to 38 an ounce, and the currencies against the US dollar exchange rate volatility is never more than parity of soy was raised to 1% plus or minus 2.25%, and the currencies against the US dollar parity itself. The agreement itself is not able to restore the convertibility of gold, but try to keep a fixed exchange rate system. Currencies have depreciation against the dollar. Yen appreciation of 17%, and Germany make the appreciation of the 14%. That can't change the gold as the dollar, and so the basis for the stable monetary system has been lost, and the mechanism for keeping the dollar stable by selling goods no longer works, and the US economy can't support a true dollar standard on its own. So eventually the system collapse. So the Smithsonian Agreement failed to stop the dollar's weakness. And in January 1973, the U.S. government announced the partially lifted price control. That is causing the inflation to rise. The marketing selling dollars and buying the Japanese yuan, and the federal Germany marks, the rise Swiss francs currencies such as agitation, and Swiss stepped when Britain followed the footsteps of announcing his currency float and abandoned the central rates. And the 19 on the 1973, the U.S. government announced another devaluation of the dollar against the gold, and the price of the gold per ounce rose from 38 to 42. And since then, almost all countries could not maintain a fixed exchange rate. And in the March 1973, the gold price climbed to 96 an ounce in London, and the major financial markets were forced to close for more than half a month. At that time, the fixed exchange rate system was finally abandoned by most countries, and the floating exchange rate system became the main exchange rate system. And the Bretton Woods system of free convertibility between dollar and the gold, and the fixed exchange rate, both of which the Bretton Woods system has sought to maintain, was dead and gone. So we overall evaluate this Bretton Woods system as it plays an important role in promoting world economic stability and development. It is the product of the history. And after the World War II, the world economy developed steadily for nearly 20 years. Among other reasons, um, it should attribute partially to the Bretton Woods systems existing and working in the international monetary system. So, second is the fixed exchange rate system adapted by the system makes the exchange rate stable, which makes it easy to calculate the cost of import and export and foreign investment and so on. It created favorable conditions for the growth of international trade and international capital flows. And secondly, the international BOP adjustment mechanism of this system has contributed to the economic growth and stability of all countries. This IMF has set up the loan mechanism of various maturity to provide loans to members with international balance of payment deficits to help them pay their difficulties. This will help the members to adjust their international BOP through loans and repayments from IMF to a certain extent, and promote domestic economic growth through international BOP adjustments. And the third one is the main reserve assets are gold and the US dollar linked to gold, which is conducive to the stability of the international monetary relationship foundation. It's not easy to see big fluctuations which make people have confidence in the development of world economy. And the broken of this system is adjustment to restore the international monetary relation before the World War II as an alternative to the gold standard system. The orderly the economic relationship are better than the disordered one. So it is more conducive to the stable development of the nation economies. And this is the center on the currency, that is US dollar, is bound to be the transitional system because this system established in early period after the World War II, when the national economies of other countries suffered great damage and losses, and the U.S. was the only one. And the U.S. has accounting almost half of world industrial production, nearly a third of world trade volume, accounting for almost 60% of its gold reserves, tremendously strength. That it has the burden of international monetary system operation ability, and other countries also have to buy their account at that moment. They also want to stable the system to promote the economic recovery. So under these conditions, is the gold dollar is equal is to the birth of the monetary system. So the change in the world economic pattern, American has changed from the situation has changed Americans' solo polity to the economic the multi polarity. The solo, one country can decide other countries' future, and right now is many countries can play the important role at the same time. The situation of other countries' economic has to challenge American power. With the dollar as the center of the system will inevitably give way to the variety of currencies as the center, or the idea of fixed value in multiple currencies as the center of the system. So current countries dominating the world situation is not the norm of the world economy. The multinational jointly play a role in the world economy is the norm. So therefore, Bretton Woods system can only be a transition from inherent laws of the world economy, and the international monetary system will even inevitably transition from a country's dominant system to collective responsible system with unbalanced economic development. So based on the dollar and the gold link, if a country's currency as a center and at the fixed exchange rate and the short-term financing for mechanisms of the system, there is an inherent instability that caused by the driven dilemma. In addition, the U.S. Paper money for by the paper exchange the paper money for the real assets in other country, which is bossy behavior that is can be discussed by other countries. So that causes the dissatisfaction in developing worlds. The rest of the developed countries are often so that when the dollar is danger, the alliance runs the golden often happen. The above problem can be said to be okay when the US is in absolute domain position in the world in the economic strength and the dollar is basically stable. But when the US is relative decline in the economic status and other countries in a relative rise in the status are determined to show their strength, the international monetary system is bound to transition from one country to multiple country centered.